Trump endorses Jim Jordan for House Speaker as Republicans grapple with a conference at odds. Jordan is currently the House Judiciary Committee chairman and a longtime Trump defender. He is one of two leading candidates vying for the speakership. Congressman Steve Scalise of Louisiana also wants the job. We have learned to add some pressure. Trump plans to visit Capitol Hill next week ahead of the House vote. On Truth Social, Trump says Jordan is strong on crime, borders, our military, vets, and the Second Amendment. He will be a great Speaker of the House and has my complete and total endorsement. Alex Gangitano, White House correspondent at The Hill, here with us now. Good morning to you. So how much weight does Trump's endorsement carry?
Yeah, it's a good question. And when he comes to town, we'll see how much it really does carry. But, you know, he is largely the reason for all of this happening and how emboldened a lot of these Trump supporter members of Congress have become. So I think him backing Jim Jordan makes the caucus of the far right, Trump supporters in the House back Jim Jordan. That's their guy now. And I think that they're going to feel comfortable being supportive of him. Some of them even floated Trump as the next speaker. We heard some behind the scenes that he was talked out of it because it would be a fairly embarrassing loss for a former president to not be elected speaker among his own Republicans. And so this is their guy. But, Steve Scalise, I think, can't be ruled out because I do think there is a large majority of the Republican conference that they might be quiet about it, but I think they're done with kind of the control that Trump has over their conference, and they want something different. And although Steve Scalise isn't, drastically different than I think a Speaker McCarthy would look like, but he's not Jim Jordan. He doesn't have the backing from Trump, so maybe that's something fresh that people want.
And we think about January, Alex, and the 15 votes it took for Kevin McCarthy to become Speaker. What are the concerns right now from moderate Republicans going into this vote?
Yeah, I think moderate Republicans have a lot of concerns, and they're also not the loud part of the conference going on right now. And so they're trying to be a little bit louder and voice their concerns. So Jim Jordan has been not supportive of more funding for Ukraine. That's something that a lot of moderate Republicans really strongly believe in, and they think that we should still be backing the war effort. He also is an extremely far right, conservative member. And I think that the moderate Republicans who believe in deal making, who believe in bipartisanship, who want to see a speaker that will go to the White House or sit down with Leader Jeffries and have conversations, not cave to Democrats, but have conversations. I think Jim Jordan's they're not seeing that as their guy. Steve Scalise knows how to work the moderates. He's been going member to member and having conversations to try to whip votes for him, which is kind of the old school approach to becoming speaker. Whereas, now we're seeing this approach of the former president on Truth Social endorse Jim Jordan. Well, Steve Scalise is going the other way and doing this old school approach of I'm going to call up members. And he has a lot going for him. He's been around for a while in the House. He has a lot of respect on both sides. He is a very conservative member. He's also Southern, and much of the caucus is. But then he also can attract moderates, especially when you have Jim Jordan on the other side, as those are your two options.
Does this trigger a rules change, the new House Speaker, the ability for one member to bring a motion to vacate? It's the reason that we're here now. It was one of the major concessions Kevin McCarthy made in January that got us to this point. Do you anticipate you'll see a lot of Republicans pushing for that change?
Yeah, I definitely think that after watching what happened to Speaker McCarthy, there's so many of his allies disappointed in what happened. They're going to want to see a rule change. At the end of the day, if Steve Scalise is the front runner here, he's going to have to make some concessions to get the people that didn't want McCarthy to vote for him because he is so similar to McCarthy. But then it also comes down to, could maybe some Democrats support him if they want to see an end to this, or if they think that a Jim Jordan speakership is so much worse for them that maybe he can get some votes from the other side of the aisle and not have to make concessions. But I do think, initially I want to say that there will be a rules change. Everybody was kind of shook by what happened to Kevin McCarthy. But at the end of the day, if he has to get the votes, we might have to see what Kevin McCarthy did happen again.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find News Nation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.